All set.
That's it.
So hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm glad you came today. My name is Carol Stern, and I'm a librarian at the Glen Cove Public Library. Before we begin, I would like you to mark your calendars and sign up for our next month's author, Bonnie Gaines. She wrote Lessons in Chemistry. She'll Zoom with us on Tuesday, December 6th at 2 p.m. Again, that's Tuesday, December 6th at 2 p.m. So hi, Lisa.
How are you? Great to be here.
It's an honor for you to be with us today. Lisa is a New York Times best-selling author on Women on Fire, The Unbreakables, and Fugitive Colors. Lisa served as an editor for the Jerusalem Post, managing editor of Today's Chicago Woman, managing editor of Moment magazine, as an editor reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Lisa has been featured on Good Morning America and Today for her work as an author, journalist, and blogger. Actress Sharon Stone is set to produce and star in the film adaptation of Women on Fire. That's amazing. Lisa lives in Chicago area with her husband and 3 daughters, and I just found out she's in Florida also. Please feel free to post your questions or comments in the chat box, and we'll try to get to them all after the event. We're going to mute everyone during this discussion, and you can either use the chat box or do live. You can ask Lisa questions at the end. So I love historical fiction. It's my favorite genre. You get a chance to learn something and get totally immersed in a wonderful story as well. I valued everything about Women on Fire. The fiery women characters, the stolen Nazi art, the history, and the relationships. So Lisa, can you tell us where you got the idea for Women on Fire?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you for this event and for all that you do. It means so much to authors, and thanks everyone for coming. So I am what's known in the business as a genre jumper. So my first book is historical fiction, Fugitive Colors. My second book, The Unbreakables, is very sexy women's fiction. And I decided during COVID lockdown that I wanted to do what I loved. If I'm going to be stuck here not moving, I am going to write my next book and put everything I want in this book. So Woman on Fire is a bit of a it's, passion, history, art, suspense, risky journalistic pursuits, and strong, fiery women. And so I threw it all together, but I really focused on 2 things. So while I was working on The Unbreakables, my second book, coming from a news background, as a journalist, I always love a good news hook in everything I write. So I had read this story called The Munich Art Hoard. And this was, I believe it was 2013. And it's the story of a man named Cornelius Gurlitt, an old man, a reclusive man in an old rundown apartment in Munich. And it was discovered in this apartment, 1,500 masterpieces worth $1.5 billion. And it turns out, and literally these paintings were stuffed in a food cabinet, layered in his stove like lasagna. And we're talking Matisse, Picasso, Chagall, major masterworks. Well, it turns out that this man was the son of Hildebrand Gurlitt, who was Hitler's personal art thief, one of 4, who dealt with so-called degenerate art that the Nazis deemed deplorable and unacceptable.
It's cutting in and
So
out.
this story sent shockwaves in the art world. And I thought to myself, wow, what if I had a very unscrupulous art dealer who went in and robbed this treasure trove? Is it a crime to rob the robber? So that was on one side. I had this story that I knew I wanted to fictionalize and use as the catalyst for this book. At the same time, I also knew that if I was going to write during COVID lockdown, be at home, I wanted to go back to a time and a place that I loved personally. As a young journalist when I was as a, you know, a young reporter in Jerusalem. And this is before kids, and I was willing to take on any assignment without seeing any of the consequences. It was a yes. It was idealistic, and it was going after the truth no matter what. And, you know, now I'm jaded and seasoned and crusty. I would never have done half the stuff that I did back then. So I thought, wow, I wanted to take a 24-year-old young journalist and put her on this story. And, you know, as she's going to make a lot of left turns. And, but in the end, she would gain the wisdom that I have as an older, more seasoned, experienced journalist, and she would learn truths. And really, there is a point where going too far is too far. So both of those came together, and I worked 10 hours a day, 7 days a week for 9 months straight and put out this book. So long answer to your question, but that's how it came about.
So the main protagonist is Jules, who you're talking about.
Yes, Jules Roth.
Is she you? Is this autobiographical?
It's I would say inspired, but I will tell you this. So she is, well, two things. She's the most me of any character I've ever written, has a lot of my background. And in fact, I gave her one of my own personal stories. And when I was 17 years old, I was on an internship in high school for 6 months, living in our state capital, working for a state senator. This is during high school. And so I was approached by a special law enforcement unit. And you have to understand, this is before phones, before internet. And they asked if I would be willing to be used as bait to help break a sex trafficking ring. And at that time, I was 17. You didn't need to ask your parents' permission. And I was like, where do I sign up? So I said yes. And this was in real time. And I was used as bait to help break this major sex trafficking ring. And we did. And people were arrested. And so for me, as a young, budding journalist wannabe, this was a big pivotal moment in my life that I knew that no matter what, I was going to go after those stories that expose the truth. And at the same time, I decided this would be great background for Jules Roth as well. So she has one of my personal stories as hers.
So she was a journalist as you were.
Yes.
How hard was it to go from journalism and reporting like that to writing fiction?
Well, okay, so you know, that's a loaded question because, you know, I still write, I pen essays, you know, now it's really essays that are related to the book, stolen art, Nazi looted art. I write a lot of essays related to that. But when I was a journalist, you know, either working for a newspaper or a magazine by day, and I was working on my fiction at night. And now the tables have turned. I'm obviously a full-time novelist, but I will write essays at night. I really believe boot camp as a journalist has really helped me as an author. I know, you know, it's inside of me how to move a chapter, how to leave a cliffhanger, how to give the reader the who, what, when, where, and why in a chapter, and then when to get out, to learn a sense of timing. So I don't think I've ever really left it. I think they both work hand in hand. Sometimes I always say that having been a journalist and an investigative journalist is sometimes a curse. You know, you mentioned that you love historical fiction. A lot of my historical fiction author friends will say, you know, have 5 sources and say, okay, this is fact. But me, I need 20 sources. And then I will say, okay, it's on repeat. This is a fact now, I can move on. So I might be a little bit slower, you know, spinning out my next book than say another historical fiction writer, because I really do go the distance. For my first book, Fugitive Colors, which is also about stolen art, but from the perspective of the painters, I researched it for 4 years before I would allow pen to paper, travel to Europe, did extensive interviews. And so I'm, pretty anal retentive when it comes to the research. So a lot of what you read in Woman on Fire that feels real is real.
Do you have an art background also, or the?
I'm not an artist. I've studied various aspects of art, but really, I would say, as I mentioned, that long research process for my first book with stolen art, you become not an expert, but a quasi-expert. So I had a really, really strong base when it came to this book in the world of stolen art.
So was the painting Women on Fire based on a real art piece? Is that?
It's not based on a real art piece, but it's based on a composite. So it's expressionist art, which, for those who don't know exactly what expressionist art is how a painting makes you feel. So you might have purple skies, green people, wild frenetic brushstrokes, but you can't walk by a work of expressionist art without having some visceral emotion. And so Woman on Fire is a work of expressionist art. It also is, for those who may have read Fugitive Colors, my first novel, an Easter egg. So the artist who painted Woman on Fire was featured in my first novel. He was the one who taught the young artists in that book how to paint in the expressionist style. So Woman on Fire is his last known painting, which is this book.
So I have a question about Impressionist art that I wrote down here.
Yeah.
Why were the Expressionists terrorized by the Third Reich more than any other movement in art?
Yeah, that is a great question. And the reason is because they were homegrown movement of art. They were founded in Germany, and they were at a time where it was such a flowering of free thinking and abstract, and not just in art, but in architecture, in all aspects, in film. And so when the Nazis came in, one of the very first things they did was to quash the free thinkers, the expressionists, in all aspects of art. In addition, sort of a sidebar to that, Hitler, as you may or may not know, was an artist in his own right. His background was in art. He was a rejected artist, having been rejected by the Fine Arts University in Austria, and where he tried to get in twice and was rejected. And so and why? Because his artwork was deemed boring, uninspiring, not of the times, not like these new movement avant-garde artists that were, growing all over Europe, and they were exciting. So when he got into power, for him, this was payback. And so one of the first things he did, and just to mention that many in his inner posse were either artists or were part of the art world. And so they went after this movement of art with a vengeance never seen before. The way they went after first the expressionists and any other avant-garde movements that were coming into Germany, and later when they started going country by country, the artworks that they would take, these sort of degenerate arts in all different countries. But, and I just want to add, they were not dumb. They knew that this particular artwork fetched big numbers abroad. So they took all of these sort of deplorable paintings and they sold them anonymously with the help of Switzerland, and all the profits went to fund the Nazi war machine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
So World War II and the Holocaust ended nearly 8 decades ago.
Yeah.
Why has this period made such an impact on the literary world? And why do you think that the Nazi looted art is still going on the newspaper, on the front pages of the newspapers today? Like
Yeah.
they're still talking about this.
It's front page news. 80 years after the war, you can go just check the New York Times and Google how many times stolen art, a story that is 80 years old. And I'm going to tell you why. Because right now, where we're at, most of the Nazis, most of the survivors, even the youngest ones are in their 80s. Okay, so Nazis and the survivors who are still alive from the Holocaust, they are dying out. What's left are the assets. And so, interestingly, all these lawsuits where family members are trying to get back reclaim the artwork that was stolen from their relatives and their ancestors. We're not even at the grandkids anymore. We're at the great grandkids who are trying to get back these paintings. But an interesting trend is happening, which is positive. So recently, the Louvre just returned 14 major artworks. New York, just a few months ago, has now made it a law in a sort of bigger Holocaust initiative, but that any painting that is stolen art and is in any museum in New York needs to have a plaque next to it saying this is an artwork that was stolen by the Nazis. So this is amazing in the art world. So you're seeing a lot of countries finally coughing up their stolen artwork that has been hanging in these revered museums for nearly 8 decades. And so just to tie it full circle, I had mentioned these auctions in Switzerland that major works of art were auctioned off and bought anonymously. Who bought these artworks? We're talking the Louvre, the Art Institute of Chicago. So many representatives of our revered museums bought these artworks that were stolen or pillaged from private collections or Jewish collections, and that are now hanging in museums and private, collections. So it's a fascinating subject, and that's why it is still front page news quite often.
So should they remain in the museums or they should be given back to the families? I mean, in the book, you have Margot. Did she have a legitimate claim
Yes.
to Women on Fire?
Yes, that is the golden question right there. Of all the questions you're going to ask, and it's the one that is the hardest to answer. So if you notice in my book, the painting is really the protagonist, the main character, because everyone revolves around this painting. And everyone truthfully has a legitimate claim. What the Nazis did is they created fake, like bills of sale or forced bills of sale. So you're, let's just say, in one aspect, a Jewish family who's being seized and pulled out of their homes, and you have this amazing collection of art. And then the Nazis will say, okay, if you give me this, we will mark this as tax debt paid off. You might have a chance to survive. You are going to sign anything anywhere in order to survive. So what's happened is the families are now using these forced bills of sale, which are now under the law deemed like marking a sale null and void. So they're using these sort of fake histories to showcase that their family or their relative lost their artwork because of a forced bill of sale. So that is being used as evidence right now. And so to your question, did Margot have a legitimate claim? The answer is yes, because Woman on Fire was sent to her grandfather, her Jewish grandfather, who was an art dealer in Paris, who had the bill of sale for him to save this painting. So he actually has a bill of sale. But does Ellis, who his mother is actually the muse of this painting. Is the painting his painting? So everyone in this book has a legitimate claim. And so that's what the big, conflict is. And in real life, that's what the conflict is. Does it belong to a museum who may or may not have signed off and gotten or purchased this painting legitimately, or to a private collector who paid a lot of money for this painting, maybe unknowingly, not knowing the backstory, the provenance, the history of this painting? So the question is, what is the truth and how is it being exposed and whose painting is it? And that's the fight. That's the story.
So in the book, whose painting was it? Whose was it?
And in my mind, it's Ellis's painting in my mind. But with Margot holding up this piece of paper with her legal, document, she has a legal claim. It's going to matter how it's being fought out. But in my mind, the painting belongs to Ellis. Someone else may have a different perspective, and they would not be wrong, because this is the problem. This is the story.
So let's talk about Ellis. He was a child of survivor of Holocaust.
Yes.
I too am a child of survivor of Holocaust. And I found, like, growing up, there were a lot of secrets that went on about, where the parents didn't want to talk about what happened, their experiences during the war.
Yes.
Can you talk about Ellis's experience, like why he, why he kept secrets and why he did what he did?
Yes. So just to say, I too am a daughter of a Holocaust survivor as well. And so it is complicated. It's very complicated. But I wanted to showcase how Ellis came to this country, and in America, you can become. You could become, you can rise, you're talented, you're smart, you're creative. And for him, he wanted to put it all aside. So he created his own story. He created a story where he came to this country with a background where his parents were wealthy with in the diamond industry, created a whole fake background. And that's how he was able to live with it. And sometimes he was coming to the end of his life, and what mattered to him, he had risen to become the shoe magnate, the Manola Blahnik of the shoe world. But here he was sick. And a lot of times when you get to the end of your life, it becomes those things that are the most important to you, the people you love, the people that mattered, and a history that he pushed aside. And so what he wanted more than anything was that connection to his mother. Everything he did in his life was with her in the background, everything. Even if he lied, even if he lived a life, even his sexuality, all those things about him was in secret. But at the end of his days, he wanted to connect to his mother. So he was going to do anything to get to connect with his mother. And the only image he had was this painting. Everything else was wiped out by the war. It was just Woman on Fire. And so he was going to do everything to get it back, and also to confront the past that he had, kept secret and pushed down all these years. And so what happens in a lot of families who have Holocaust survivors, either it's very secretive, they don't talk about it, they don't want to talk about it. Maybe there were families that were lost or children that were lost, and they've built this new life. But it never really goes away. And so I came from a family where they did talk about it. My grandmother is the voice in my head. My grandmother was my best friend. She lost everybody, her siblings, her parents, everybody in Auschwitz. She survived. Her immediate family survived. But for her, her greatest joy was her legacy and her fight and her Judaism. So everything I do, every story that I write is with her in my mind, and to fight, to stand up, to be proud of being Jewish, but at the same time, to laugh, to live and, not just be stuck in the past, even though I write a lot about the past in all my work. But, it's complicated. I don't know how it was in your family. Was it the same? Did they talk about it?
When I was younger, they really didn't talk about it. I think as I got older, my parents were interviewed by the Steven Spielberg,
Yes.
and then I learned a lot of history of what had happened. But growing up, it wasn't really talked about. I mean,
Yeah.
I used to sit and watch those tapes, and I was like, oh my God.
Right. Right. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. Before we keep going, can everybody please make sure they're muted because we're hearing background noise, and I think. Okay, let's mute you. Okay, so if you could just keep yourself muted, we would appreciate it. So I have two more questions. Is Lillian your grandmother? Was that based on your grandmother?
Yes, Lillian is my grandma Rachel. Everyone must know. Yes, her spunk, her fight, her, all of it. Her drive, her trying to, you know, uh, do things that were right. I mean, my grandmother didn't have Lillian's vengeance, where, my grandmother was very loving, but every bit of Lillian was my grandmother. It was definitely an ode to her. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked her character. So going back to Ellis, you decided to, he lost his eyesight before he got the painting. Why did you do that? Like, what was your thinking?
The reason I did that is I wanted to, and it's funny because as a writer, you make all kinds of decisions. And I knew before I even really sat down to write that was going to be the situation, that he was never going to see, am I giving away the spoilers here?
I think most people have read the book, so go
Okay,
ahead.
so, and I'm just going to tell you why, because I wanted to stick to the concept of expressionist art. Expressionist art is not what you see, it's how it makes you feel. So in that one scene, he wasn't going to see his mother, but he was going to feel her. And you had Jules and you had Adam holding his hands basically on each side of him, taking the painting from top to bottom and describing it. And he was going to remember the gold in his mother's hair when she used to brush this long, beautiful hair. He was going to smell it. It was going to have all this sensory reaction to his mother, except for being able to see it. But like expressionist art and staying true to the art, he was going to feel it. And so that was going to be, in the end, enough. And I knew it was going to have to end that way.
He also hid his sexuality.
He hid his sexuality. Yes, he did. And, that was another aspect to his A Life of Secrets.
So can we talk about Margot? She's a very complex character.
Yes.
How did you come up with her?
And it's funny, and I would imagine if you asked 9 out of 10 writers, they love writing their evil characters. I mean, I remember every time I would sit down to a chapter of Margot and I would say, yes, it's Margot time. And so I have always felt that the best dark characters are those who are not all evil. So Margot had a very vulnerable side to her. She grew up as this poor little rich girl. She was neglected. She raised herself. And her one soft spot, the one piece of this psychopathic character, was her grandfather. And who did her grandfather, what did her grandfather love more than anything? Well, he obviously loved her, but he loved his art. And this painting, this particular painting, meant everything to him. So if Margot was going to have any soft spot, it was going to keep her grandfather's good name, but to get this painting back. This was all going to be for her connection to her grandfather. And so, obviously, I created a character who was very difficult, sort of a very unscrupulous art dealer, and they exist, as we know. I wanted to showcase how there were art dealers, and there are art dealers to this day who know the secret history of a painting, and keep it secret instead of, you know, coming up front and being, you know, saying what the true history is. And I wanted to also showcase that here, yet again, is another character that is really revolving around the importance of this painting, Woman on Fire.
And you did that well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So there were a lot of sex scenes in the book. So
Yes.
where did you get the inspiration to write that?
Oh, you
And
know.
why did you choose to put them in?
I mean, you know, I feel like passion is part of life, and I felt like that was an important layer to the book. Art, passion, the chemistry between the characters. But here's the thing. When I write a sex scene, and in my middle book, it's a very sexy book, The Unbreakables. But when I write a sex scene, it's not about the sex. It's about moving the story along. As you can see in the sex scenes, it's not the technical aspect or wild, you know, slammed against the wall or across a kitchen table type of sex. It's really what the characters are thinking while they're at their most intimate and most vulnerable, naked. And so that is what is happening in the sex scenes of this book. It's how it is moving the plot along and what's going through the character's head while the action is going on. And that's an important movement. And I think that that's really in all my books. And I think a really good sex scene is not just, you know, wild sex. It's about what the vulnerabilities and what's going on in someone's head while these other things are happening.
So was the book well received? I mean, everybody I gave it to loved it.
Yeah, it's been a crazy, exciting journey. As you know, it's been a New York Times bestseller, and Katie Couric, and it was the Barnes and Noble pick of the month for March, and lots of other things. And then, you know, the other exciting news is that, you know, the actress Sharon Stone read it, loved it, contacted me, and is now set to adapt it into film. So it's been a wild, exciting journey. But for me, honestly, and as you know, as a daughter of a Holocaust survivor, I love teaching something. And I love when you see this painting, and what's really happening is the bigger picture, how one powerful painting is really showcasing what happened to the more and how it impacted all these people, one painting, but really the bigger picture of the more than 600,000 works of art that the Nazis plundered, looted, confiscated, and really to showcase what happened during the darkest chapter of art history ever. And really, it wasn't, as you know, just in Germany. The Nazis made it a priority to rape and pillage every single country of their most important artworks. And that's what they did as they moved through. And so that's the takeaway. You know, obviously the suspense and it being a page turner is exciting, but the takeaway is the takeaway. I think a lot of people learned a lot about stolen art. I think they learned tidbits like that the designer Hugo Boss, you know, which I put in, that he was the designer of all the Nazi uniforms. And not just that, he was part of the Nazi elite, you know, so he was, you know, it was not just a financial thing, it was a philosophical thing. It was, you know, what was important to him. We're seeing this right now today with the whole Kanye West story and Adidas, you know, breaking off. But who was Adidas? Adidas had ties to the Nazis as well. That whole story. There's a lot of backstories that are connected to a lot of stories of today. And, you know, so those things I find fascinating. Those things I also like to put into the book because it lends authenticity and truth. And those are both extremely important to me in terms of historical fiction and in doing what I do.
Yeah, it was a lot of information you gave, and you learn a lot. So going back what you said to Sharon Stone, you
Yes.
said Sharon Stone contacted you. Tell us that
It's a
story.
crazy story. It's a crazy story. So, before a book, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, but before a book is actually a book, and here I just, I brought the book here for those who haven't read Woman on Fire, but before it's this, it's what's called an ARC, an advanced reader's copy, which the publishing houses sends out to the media in order to get book buzz. So it's the pre-book book. So a couple things had happened. I had read Sharon Stone's memoir, The Beauty of Living Twice, and I was blown away. And it was, of course, having, Me Too stories and lots of different aspects of her that I never knew. She had a stroke, was given 1% chance to live. It took her 7 years to recover. And I thought to myself, wow, this is really a strong, incredible woman. At the same time, I had received a book blurb from a wonderful author, Kristen Harmel, who writes fabulous historical fiction. And her last line of her book blurb for me was, Woman on Fire is Woman in Gold meets Spotlight meets Basic Instinct, which is Sharon's film. So these two things were happening at once. And I was like, click. I thought to myself, you know what? I am going to send my book out to one celebrity. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. So I found where her her business manager was located. And I sent her an ARC, which I was explaining, the pre-book book. So it hadn't yet become a book. So this was in October of 2021. It was November 2021. And my husband and I were watching Netflix like everybody else. And all of a sudden, I get a text on my phone and it said, hi, it's Sharon Stone. I'm in Dubai. I'm reading your book. I'm loving it. Has anyone optioned it? And I thought, oh my God. Oh my God. Mic drop. But really my first reaction, it was one of those, I'm in Barcelona. I lost all my money. Can you send me, one of those? And then I remembered that I had sent this book out and I thought, oh my God, this is really happening. So we got in contact, and obviously through lawyers and such, we signed a deal in December of that year. And she's, going to direct, she's not going to direct, but she's producing it, which is she puts together all the pieces. And she is lovely and supportive and, just a really generous woman. So it's been kind of fun getting to know her as well. So it's all in the beginning stages of the movie part of it, but it's moving, so it's exciting.
Do you have the characters casted yet?
No, it's now more the screenplay is being developed, the director's being assigned, and all that is kind of in, that's rolling right now.
I have someone who could play Lillian if you're looking for
Yeah,
her.
who's the person?
My friend's sister is Kathy Ladman. She lives in California. She's an actress.
Really? Okay, I'll keep
And
that in mind.
she would fit the part. She's my age, or she's my age, and she would fit the part perfectly.
That's well, you never know. I mean, that whole aspect of it is all Sharon's wheelhouse, but she is consulting me, which is kind of fun, and it's been really a great journey. But she's also, she's on the board of the Illinois Holocaust Museum. She's very involved in the artwork world and is very much of an activist. So very a fascinating woman, very rounded, well-rounded. And
I'd also love to see Anne Hathaway as Jules. I think she would be a great Jules.
She would be a great Jules. I love Anne Hathaway. So yeah, so lots of different things. And of course, I'm on full-on book tour. And at the same time, I have to be, I'm on deadline with my new manuscript. So it's a whole lot of things going on at once here. So it's a little bit of crazy over here at my house.
Are you involved in the movie? Are you involved in producing it at all too? or-
I eventually I'll have a role in it, but right now it's sort of sitting back and letting the professionals do what they do best. You know,
I can't wait. This should be great.
thank
Although
you.
I always love books more than movies, but it should be
Yeah,
interesting.
no, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting for sure.
So what do you want readers to take away with after reading Women on Fire?
Oh gosh, well, it's as I had mentioned. For me, it's not just about a beautiful painting that's recovered, but knowing that this fight is not over, that you are having, just for example, in the Supreme Court, they just decided on a case on a Pissarro, a family fighting for 20 years to get their painting back. Imagine all those legal fees for 20 years when they actually had the picture of their grandparents and the painting on the mantelpiece right there, and they had to fight 20 years. So it's to know that this fight still continues, that there are hundreds of thousands of women on fires out there just waiting for the truth to be exposed. And so that's the takeaway. And and I want people really, as I said, to really learn and understand about stolen art. So when you see an article or a painting that has been returned to a family, to understand after reading Woman on Fire, what really goes into it, that it's not just a painting that you're seeing, that it's not just about a multi-million dollar painting, but what's behind it, knowing that it was an entire community, a Jewish world that was so culturally rich, that was just quashed and destroyed, and to know that that was also part of the story of what happened. That's the takeaway.
Bravo. So can you talk about your next book, what it's about?
Yes, yes. So every time, I tell myself, all right, enough with World War II history, do something else. And I actually did in my second book, The Unbreakables. But I'm back in, and this book is called The Goddess of Warsaw. And it's about a legendary Hollywood actress who has a very dark, secret past that took place during the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. And her past is now coming to haunt her. And so it's suspense, it's historical, and I'm knee deep right now in the Warsaw Ghetto uprising.
And
So,
when can we read this?
so I'm turning it in March 1st. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that's the date. And then as it goes through the editing process, I'm sure it's going to be in 2024. The book will come out.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, I will find you when that book comes out.
Oh, please do. You can come back and talk about
I will
that.
come back and find you. Yes.
So we have 32 questions in
Oh
the
my
chat
God.
room. So let me start
Let's
getting
get to
some of
it.
them.
Yes.
And if anybody wants to ask questions, they can. Let me start from the beginning. So excited to be here to talk to you about your wonderful book. We read this. The book is a life changer. Thank you from Suffolk County. Loved your book. I learned so much. Ellen Clark wrote, I found out about you from Facebook. Thank you, all the Glen Cove people. We don't want to hear that. Wow, what an assignment for a 17-year-old, Ellen Clark wrote. That's true. The sting you were on would have made a book in itself. That was some story.
Yeah.
Oh, so if I may ask, who pays for your research trips?
Oh, who pays?
Yeah,
You're
Rena
looking at her. You're looking at her, my friend. I pay for my research trips. You gotta love what you do. And, to me, especially when you're dealing with World War II history and the Holocaust, you gotta get it right. And so I pay for my research trips. It is what it is. That's part of this, the exploration. That's part of, obviously, I could probably, write off my research trips, from my taxes, that kind of thing, just to be perfectly financially transparent, but I pay for my research trips.
Do you travel a lot?
I do travel a lot, and just a story relating to this book. So when I was doing research, I kept coming across this name everywhere I go. This guy named Arthur Brand. Arthur Brand. Who is this guy? So it turns out that he is who they called him the Indiana Jones of the art world, and he's based in Amsterdam, and he is the premier hunter for Nazi looted art. So I said to myself, I'm going to find this guy. I found him, we connected. I told him I'm writing this book and that I'd love to interview him. So I had an interview set up for March 14th, 2020. And we know what happened then. It was right when everything was shut down during COVID. So I had to cancel the trip, but we stayed in contact and I sent him the book, and he is the inspiration for Bram Baker in my book, the hunter, the art hunter based in Amsterdam. So lots of cool, interesting things. But I had planned, back to your original point, on my own dime to go to Amsterdam to do that research and to meet with this guy who is making all the difference in tracking down stolen art and forged art as well. Forgeries.
Interesting.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So Rena Cohen wrote, I'm having a visceral reaction to the painting behind you. Can you talk about it a little?
Yeah, this is so funny. So this is in my bedroom in our place in Boca, and if you see me in my usual background, it's all books. It's a bookshelf. But you know what? We're talking art. This is the brightest room. And is it a visceral good reaction? What's your reaction? I'm curious. It is abstract, actually.
Yes, I absolutely love it. And I have a blue and white bedroom where that would fit perfectly, right?
Okay. So yeah, so this is a painting in my home that when I walked past it in the gallery, I stopped and I was like having that oh my God feeling, and now it's here.
So Marsha Blisman wrote, I love that there were two procrastinators, who felt they were rightfully entitled to Women on Fire. That was so interesting.
Thank you.
Sandra Weinreb wrote, you're certainly a very brave 17-year-old. To allow yourself to be bait is amazing.
Let me just say, if my daughters, I have 3 daughters, and they're 25, 23, and 22, if any of them had done any of that without telling me, never would have happened. But it's a different time and place, back then, you didn't have to get your parents' permission for anything. So very different world we're living in now.
How hard was it to write the scene when Ellis' mother is shamed?
It was very hard for me. It was the hardest scene to write. Well, that there was, and then Dan's death later was a hard scene for me to write too. Dan, the investigative reporter, but that scene was very difficult, and I cried writing it, absolutely, for sure. It's even when I had to edit it, all the times that I've had to see the book, going back to that scene was emotional for me, for sure.
Another question is, I know this is a common question, but who do you see selected to the main parts? Is that in the movie?
I can't really give that away. I wish I could. I had people in my mind, and so I'm always, whenever we have more of a chance, I'm always, especially during book clubs where it's kind of an intimate live setting, I always ask the readers who they see as the parts, because that's more interesting to me, who they envision as the characters along the way. So if the person who asked the question wants to jump in, have at it.
How about William Macy as Ellis?
Someone else has mentioned him as well as Ellis.
Anybody answer that? Allison Oberman wrote, "You're as impressive as your book." I totally agree.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, Eleanor Shepherd wrote, "I was taken aback when the painting in Margot's possession turned out to be a forgery." Can you?
Yes,
That?
yes. Well, I had to keep the real one, safe. But that was also very interesting. Everything you learned about in terms of forgery was based on how forgeries are made, and so that's one strong aspect of the research I enjoy doing. And the two, and Dan is one of my favorite characters. Jules is, a mentor, based on two editors that I had in the past. He's a composite character who I feel very connected to, for sure.
It's interesting that you do that you write, I guess that's how people write. They write what they know.
Yeah.
Roberta Glucksman wrote, "What a great interview. If I had to read the book already, which I loved, I would run to the store or internet to get it."
Oh my gosh, thank you. Let's do an infomercial on that one. No, I really appreciate it. And, honestly, like, it's, I've been a journalist and I've been an author, and it's like I feel, very blessed. I mean, listen, it is a lot of work. It's, this is obviously the more glamorous part. It's nuts and bolts. It's when you're have a deadline. I've had to miss a lot of important events, that were important to me. It's a lot of work, but I love what I do. When I'm writing, and I write in my own, in a cafe in a corner, because writing is so solo, and at times it can be very lonely, just you and your keyboard. So I like to write where there's people around and airborne conversation. But I am doing what I love, and writing is breathing for me. So I feel like it's such a gift to be able to do what I love. A lot of people, have to do, work hard and maybe do what they love as a hobby, which is pretty much the norm. So, this is what I love to do. And I feel very grateful when I hear from people and that they love the book, or if I hear from someone and there was something that they didn't like, I take it in, because I like to know things for next time when I'm sitting down and writing. And if there's something that I'm doing that's not working, it's always good to know. But it's weird. This particular book was everything I love doing, and it really poured out of me. So I'm really happy when I feel like it connects to people and that it moved them as well. It doesn't always happen that way. And so I'm really grateful.
Sandra Oneridge wrote, "I must admit I've attended many authors speaking to people who may or may not have read the book being discussed, but you are by far very interesting, and that I have not enjoyed anyone as much as hearing you." I agree.
Oh my
Thank you.
gosh.
I've been on the wait list for your book for many weeks, and now I really can't wait.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Thank you very much.
Let's see. Writing curriculum is so lacking in your education. Do you think help to develop a love of writing? Actually, this is spelling errors. And still to support your passion.
What's the question?
The writing curriculum is so lacking in your education. What do you think helped to develop a love? I guess she meant love of writing, and still support your passion.
So first of all, I agree that, it's funny because, I always get worried with, kids these days. I mean, I'm old school, and I loved the spelling list at the beginning of the week. And at Fridays, we had our tests, and you knew the difference between there and there, or which, and which, and all those things. I really was nurtured. I went to a Jewish day school growing up, and so it was a small group of kids, the same Solomon Schechter, for those who know, Jewish day schools, best place. But my teachers really nurtured my writing at a young age and really encouraged creativity. So I from a young age, I was writing short stories and poems. And in high school, I was writing the yearbook. In college, I was very involved in reporting. So my personal experience, I was writing and I had some really tough editors who were mean. You know, if it wasn't right, get back and do it again. So I come from, you know, the school of get it right or you do it again. I come from, if you have someone's name spelled wrong, you lose the opportunity of writing that piece. So it's the spell checking, it's the learning, it's, you know, reading makes you a better writer. So it's yes, it's talent and some of it is innate, but it really is technical and learning the skills and not being afraid of being surrounded by people who are way better than you are and learning. So I love that. I love when my editor takes something I write and it changes up the sentence and I'm like, oh my God, that word is so good. And like, I you know, I get crazy, I get excited. So it's very important to surround yourself with people who are good writers, good teachers, and to learn and to sponge it up. And I'm still learning. When I see some of my friends who are just amazing writers, I learn from them and I try to adapt it into some of my own writing style. So it's never, okay, I'm here, I've arrived, I'm done. Not a chance. I feel like I'm always a work in progress, you know, but, you know, and so that's why I'm always telling people, you know, all right, the kids are grown up and you're saying, okay, what do I do now? Find whatever it is at any age, that thing that makes you feel alive and go for it. And so for me, it's writing. And for someone else, you know, it might be sculpting or it might be biking or whatever it is that makes you feel alive, you know, you got to go for it. So that's
I agree.
learning. Yeah.
So Ellen Clark wrote, this was one of the best presentations I've attended anywhere. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. I also wanted to say I'm very accessible. Like if you want to follow me on Instagram, Lisa Barr 18, of course 18, which is high. That's my lucky number. But you know, follow me, connect with me. I love meeting and knowing people and connecting on a personal level. And then this way you get to see my process because what'd you say?
Let me read this lady. She is so fabulous. I gotta read it.
Yeah. So, you know, connect with me. That's great. You know, I have a newsletter, you know, just different things that if you want to stay connected, or if I'm coming to your town to speak, I can let you know about those things as well.
Well, my main choice is this one.
Can you mute yourself if you're not talking, asking a question, please?
I think Amy and
Someone appreciated that you put the books in large print and hope all your books are in large print.
Yes, it's in large print. It's on audio, which is great. You know, in all the different formats that people like to read, which I think is wonderful.
Did you have a muse like Dan in your life? Enjoyed the book in your chat.
Yes, I had a couple editors who were just spectacular. There was a guy that I worked for when I was in like television. I was his researcher, and he would never let me take no for an answer. The mayor's in a meeting, you find a way to get the story or don't come back. Okay, one of those editors. And, you know, so though I learned the most, where never take no for an answer and you find a way to get the story. And so those old school editors and writers are the absolute best because you learn the most. And so I had to include this sort of curmudgeon-y guy into this book. Another editor, I was the managing editor of a magazine called Moment, which was founded by Elie Wiesel. And my editor there, Herschel Shanks, who passed away, was the absolute best. He was difficult, he was demanding, but wow, did I learn from him. So I kind of threw all of those characteristics in and I gave that one guy, I made him Dan. So, through life, we meet some incredible people along the way. We meet some challenging people all along the way. My friends and I always joke that our evil characters are always that mean girl in high school. Put her in there, give her, that awful person. So, a lot of times that happens as authors, or, that's how we come up with names, or, various things. But usually my very characters who mean a lot to me are usually someone or a composite who've meant something to me personally in my journey along the way. So, yeah.
Are any of your daughters writers?
So my eldest has been in fashion. My middle daughter is at the Art Institute in Chicago, and my youngest is in Thailand traveling. So, I never sleep. It's like 3 daughters. It's a drama every 10 seconds. I love them. They are my whole life. And yeah, it's been an interesting ride for sure. But no, they are not book people. And they, in fact, and this is interesting, they have not read my books. Okay. And you can talk to a lot of authors. Their friends have read my books. They are so proud of me. They promote me. They just want me as mom, and I get it. And so I know they will one day, and they're super proud, but they just want me as mom, and I'm happy for that as well.
I have a few more questions. Do you have a few more time, or do you have to
Yeah,
go?
no, we're good. We're good. Bring it on. Yes, of course.
Do you interview families who art was stolen?
Yes, I have interviewed, in fact, this is kind of a funny story. I'm not going to give away names, but in my first book, there was a famous art dealer, and he survived the war and came to New York, and he was a very prominent, important art dealer. He was the inspiration for the French art dealer in my book, Fugitive Colors. Anyway, through some sleuthing, I was able to connect with his granddaughters. And so I said to them, I said, I'd love to interview you. Your grandfather's the inspiration for this character in my book, and let me send you the books first. So I sent her Fugitive Colors, and I get a call from her maybe 3 weeks later, and she said, we loved the book. She said, but I have to say, my grandfather was not a womanizer. And so I said, oh my God, I should have mentioned that I took this brilliant art dealer and gave it a fictional, spin to it. And so it was very funny, but then we ended up meeting in New York, and we developed this beautiful, lovely relationship. And so one of their paintings were, in fact, one of the paintings in the stove that I mentioned, a Matisse, a multi-million-dollar Matisse, happened to have been one of her family's paintings that were in this book, Woman on Fire, the older man's treasure trove that he hoarded in his apartment was one of her family paintings. Wow. So I have met some incredible people, and even when I do lots of live book events, people who've come up to me in the audience and have said, my family's paintings, blah, 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 or I had a stolen artwork, or, whatever it is. And so it's been really fascinating. Also, I had an interesting situation. I was giving a speech, and someone came in and said that her family's from Munich, and while they were not a Jewish family, they hid a family, but her family they were artists, her family. And so just very fascinating, inspiring conversations that have been sprung from this book, which is great, and I welcome it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you work from an outline, or did you just sit down and type? And where did you grow up?
Okay, so I grew up in Northbrook, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. Do I work from an outline? So I am the mad professor. If you go to my Instagram that I mentioned and you scroll through, you will see the method of my madness. So I'm sort of a hybrid in the writing community. If you go to a lot of book events, you will most notably hear this question: are you a plotter or a pantser? A plotter is someone who plots every sequence of the book, then they sit down to write, they have this gorgeous outline, and boom, they just roll with it. A pantser is someone who opens up their computer and just starts writing, and it's like piano, and the characters take you to all the places. So I'm a hybrid, I would say. So I have this fantastical outline, very much like Jules in the book. So my entire kitchen table with the leaves pulled out, my dining room table with the leaves pulled out. So we're talking seating 20, seating 14. Every inch of those two tables have note cards and sticky notes and all my crazy from the top to bottom. So this is going on for about 2 weeks. My family is like relegated to the TV room, eating at a coffee table, my poor family, and my note cards take up all the space. So I go through everything, and then it's in my brain, and I push them all aside, and then I sit down to write, and then I start to go. And then the characters take me places, but it's sort of in my brain. I know where I'm going. With historical fiction, there's certain things that have to be timelined in exactly, as it goes in order to be truthful. But I do that. Then I have sort of a weird quirk. If we have time, I read my entire manuscript aloud to my dog. And so my dog, who thinks everything I do is brilliant, she doesn't move. She listens to the manuscript from top to bottom, but there's a purpose, because when you write a book, you see it and read it one way. When you actually print it out, it reads a totally different way. When you hear it, you hear the book another way. And so I will, hear description, and I'll say to myself, oh my God, I'm bored. I need to delete that right now. Or I could tell you, say, reading it out loud, that the word enjoy is on page 27, and it's also on page 52. So you start to like memorize your book, but reading it out loud is such a gift to the book, because you really start to hone it in and it comes together. So I read it out loud to the dog twice, right before I turn it into my editors, and right before the very last round of edits when it's about to become a book. And that's kind of my quirky thing. My writer friends, give me a lot of crap for that, but as a joke and teasing. But it really is a very smart way to hear your book out loud and to catch the mistakes.
Oh, all of that is worth all the effort, because the book is
Yes.
great.
Thank you.
What someone, Lila said, wonderful interview. Thank you, Carol Stern, for a wonderful mix of thoughtful questions. And Lisa Barr, the depth of your knowledge, articulateness, and lively personality made you a delight to listen to. Many thanks to the Glen Cove Library. Thank you. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And Carol, your questions were perfect and just inspiring. So thank you so much for all that you do for authors. It's really, as they say in my world, a mitzvah. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Carol.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Fabulous.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Lisa, really, if you want to, someone for your grandmother, that she's great, my friends.
Oh, really? Okay, good to know.
I'm going to email you her information. She would fit the part. She looks.
Oh my God. All right. Well, send it to me. I don't have any control over that, but sure, why not?
You never know.
You never know. So have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you. It was
If you need
wonderful.
anything- and if you got any pictures of us, I'd love to promote, like with our event. Maybe let me see if I can screenshot this.
And it's going to be, it was taped. So if you go onto our website, you'll be able to look at it if you want.
All right. So I'm going to grab a smile from you, Carol. And Got it. All right. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it.
It's
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Wow.
That was
Thank
great,
you.
Carol.
Bye, Carol. Thank you.
Great.
Hi, Nancy.
Wow.
Thank you all for coming. I'm going to end the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
again.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Bye.